Okay, people. So now it's like January 2nd, 2000 and, I guess, 18 now. And yesterday I just pretty much worked on listing documents. I kind of did that for 2 days. So now I've got today and tomorrow to finish up with the amendment for the notice of claim for CIBC Bank, and to get my appeal in. And I'm telling myself, this is no time to feel sorry for yourself. In other words, don't start crying. Because I really feel like crying, people. Right? Because these people take advantage of you. That's why they do it. That's what I said. These provincial laws, they're not written to protect the public. They're written to take people's money away. Take their houses away. Take their loved ones away. Take their assets away. Separate them from their loved ones. That's what those provincial laws are written for. Because the baby boom is a cash cow. The baby boomers is a cash cow for the provincial governments that operate under these laws. And their houses are a form of, it's a means to stimulate the economy. Because once somebody's evicted from their home, right, the house goes up for sale. The kids get rich. Mom and dad, they're in the care home now. They don't need the money. Sure, put them over there, and we'll just have, the Diabetes Association show up and pack up the house and do a mass donation at Value Village. Just load up the truck and drive it straight to Value Village and just make a donation, and that because it's coming in on a truckload, right? That the Value Village, they give the Diabetes Association X amount of dollars per weight per donation, right? So they gut the whole house at one time, and then it becomes a feeding frenzy for the realtors, the realty industry, right? Because the house gets to go up for market, right? And because we've got this network of rich immigrants from different countries coming in and buying up all the property at overinflated prices, where oftentimes they're laundering money through these properties. This was all established under the BC Liberal government. That's just one more family that can't afford to buy a home in Canada, that was born in Canada. That's just one more family that's going to find themselves out on the streets after it's all said and done. So anyway, I'm looking at court cases right now, trying to determine how I should amend this notice of claim for the bank and just add in, I guess, 3 court cases as a reference. Only for some reason I'm reading this one with those old people, right, that were in the news, that were trying to get themselves released from the Vancouver Island Health Authority and Riviera Incorp. I guess the Riviera Incorp is an assigned committee group or something, or maybe it was a care home, I'm not sure. But I'm reading it, right, and I kind of understand what I'm reading, but I kind of don't. I understand it in the context of the Mental Health Act, the Patients Property Act, the Adult Guardianship Act, the mental health regulations. I mean, that's just goes in line with the Mental Health Act, right? It just gives you more detail. I understand that too because I've read them. Right? And in this case, for these old people, that's what they did. These doctors, they ended up signing them on under the Mental Health Act. And then the public guardian and trustee through the Adult Guardianship Act jumped on board and put an application into the court to take over their assets, because these doctors that decided that these people couldn't live on their own took over their lives, people. And then once they start doing that, they start taking over their assets. And of course they blame the patients by saying that they didn't want home care to come in and help them with their, physical needs, right? In terms of, like one lady had the woman, the wife, she had an ulcer that needed tending, and that type of thing. So I guess this elderly couple refused to have home workers come into their home and help them with those types of medical needs, right? And because of that, these doctors said, well, that's it. Since you're not going to allow us to come into your house and help you, we're just going to make it so that you don't have a house. And we're going to put you over here, and we're going to take away all your assets, and we're going to make it so you can't run away. And we're going to force you with the types of things that we want to do for you. So, I don't know. This was in 2014. I only have the initial petition that went in. And then I have the, this was done on the 13th of February. And this was done on the 21st of February. I don't know what the follow-up is. I would assume that they never got out. I would assume that, being that they were 86 years old, chances are they're probably already dead by now. Right? And if not, they're just tucked away off to the corner somewhere and forgotten about. Outside of maybe somebody like me reading this. Right? Now, this would be more applicable for Fraser Health Authority, because Fraser Health Authority never used any of these acts, and if they did, they haven't produced the evidence, right, in terms of illegally detaining Uncle John, right? They're trying to say, from my understanding, with the last time I was in court, that they just released him. They just let him go. Because, the doctor said it was okay for him to go. The duty of care was to the patient. Even though they're trying to slander me and, subliminally accuse me all over again, like they were doing when Uncle John was in their facilities, right? At the end of the day, they're trying to say that they don't know what happened to him. And it's not their responsibility to know after he was released, based on, I guess, what the doctor said. Even though throughout all my videos, you can see it was a big kerfuffle to try and get him to be released without them following him home and then, bombarding our house and dragging his ass back out of here, right? That's why we didn't rush him home, people, because we didn't want to bring him home and then they come knocking on the door with the police and all this other shit, saying, oh, we're here to come get Mr. Duncan because he wasn't officially released. So that's why we didn't take the chance to bring him home officially, oh, gee, John, let's go home. And then just walk ourselves out of there. Because those social workers and whatnot, with what they were doing, they would have followed us out and they would have caused a big kerfuffle. And not only would they have caused a big kerfuffle, but I witnessed that man with the $5 million that was sitting in the foyer. I didn't have my camera at the time, so I couldn't have videotaped it, right? And his friend was trying to get him, his friend was trying to help him to leave, to go back home. This was a man with $5 million, people. He was a Fiji man. He had no family, nothing out here. All he had was friends, right? And the social workers were standing around, and he had his bag and he was in his wheelchair. His friend was there, but what happened was the social workers had called the cops to prevent him from leaving, right? And, I bent down, and this man told me, he said, look, he says, get me out of here, help me to get out of here, because these women, they beat me, the nurse beats me. That's what he said. The nurse beats me, and they're always making me take medication where I feel really bad. He says, I can't do anything with this medication, and the nurse beats me to take this medication. I'm forced to take this medication. Please help me get out. And then I'm looking around, and I said to the social worker, I said, well, he wants to leave. And she just said, well, why should he leave? He's only going to be back here in 6 months from now. He's not going anywhere. Serious, people. That's what she said to me. And then, of course, the cops showed up. And then what happened from that point forward is they made it so that that man who was trying to help the man with the $5 million leave the facilities just wasn't allowed to go into the facilities anymore. That was the facility Uncle John was in. So in that case, why would we try and bring Uncle John home without them saying it was okay? Because we didn't want them come banging on our door. Because I have heard another story. When Uncle John went missing, there was a man that rented his room for a few months, right? And he told me it happened to his mother. The same thing. They decided that they wanted to keep her, right? Even though he was at home looking after her. And they took her. And then he ended up bringing her home. And not even 3 days after he brought her home, social workers and whoever showed up at the door with cops and came in and took his mother out of her own house, people. And then made it where he couldn't see her anymore. And he just didn't have the resources to fight. He had cancer, or he was developing, he ended up developing cancer. I don't know if he had cancer at the time, but when I met him, he had already had cancer and had operation and stuff. But when he was looking after her, she went into the hospital, whatever, and then, he brought her home. And because they didn't want her to be at home, they wanted to take over her assets. They came into the house with the cops, and they took her out of the house with the cops. And then they made it so that he couldn't see her anymore. This was his mother. And he just didn't have the resources to fight. So he lost his mother. This was a man that was sleeping in Uncle John's room that told me this, that happened to him and his mother. On top of what I witnessed at that care facility with that man saying, help me get out. Okay? So when I tell you that these provincial laws are not written for the best interest of the patient, it's true. The Criminal Code of Canada is written for the best interest of the patient. So anyway, I don't know what to do here. I don't want to keep this video very long because I don't want to be distracted today. It's like 6:30 in the morning, so my day is just starting. Right? I'm going to work on this all day in between crying. Right? Because I'm going into a bias court system that, tries to throw in this boomerang at every corner in terms of bad advice or no advice. Oh, simply go bankrupt. Yeah, I know why you told me to go bankrupt now, because if I would have went bankrupt, I wouldn't have a case. Right? I would have been wiped off the map for sure. So, that in itself is a crime when you've got lawyers giving you bad advice just to protect the status quo. Right? In terms of that money train. Because even though some of these guys are old, they don't care because they don't think it's going to happen to them. Right? As long as it doesn't happen to you, most people don't care. So anyway, I don't know if I should use this with Fraser Health. If they're watching, I'm sure they'll know what case I'm talking about. Right? The only thing that I can see that would be good about this particular case is at least they did use the Mental Health Act, the Patient Property Act, the Adult Guardianship Act, where with Uncle John, they didn't use anything. Okay? They just used a lot of dirty pool tactics. That's all they did. And public slander. Right? And hate propaganda. And that kind of stuff to distract away from what they were doing. Right? If they could get those workers at that care facility or at the hospital to point their fingers at me and to dislike me and to hate me and to talk bad about me and to spread rumors about me, right? Through a group hypnosis, because for whatever reason, in terms of they felt that they had to protect Uncle John from me and his grandchildren and his great-grandchild, you know, as if we were such bad people. Right? Then, because that's basically what they did, people. And then to just let him go with no ID, no nothing. And then not follow up where he went. Even though he couldn't see where the hell he was going. And to let him leave with strangers. Basically, strangers. And then play dumb in court. And still have the nerve to accuse me in a subliminal kind of roundabout way. Of abuse, just that they don't have to be held responsible for their inadequate care that put his life in danger and continues to put my family's life in danger, including myself, but mainly myself. So, this is the first one that's out of the sleeve here, so maybe I should go with what calls me. Right? Maybe these old people, these ones, didn't want people coming into their home, because maybe some of these care workers that come into homes, you know, they're stealing, right? Maybe they're not doing a good job. You know, maybe they're there to cause trouble versus to actually do their jobs, right? Who knows? Who knows? If they were fighting, if they took it to court to fight to go home, but they lost the right to go home and instead got put away into some care facility and forgotten about after their money was robbed from them. Okay? I don't know. Because it's really apparent that these corporations can't manage their employees, people. Because if they can manage their employees, what happened to Uncle John wouldn't have happened to him. They're not monitoring their employees. They're letting their employees be and do what they want. Basically, that's what they're doing. I'm just going to read this part here. Legal argument in support of the order for the respondents to indemnity costs and expenses of this proceeding. So, I guess they were asking for leniency in terms of costs, right? Because they were, even though their assets were taken away from them, technically they were poor, right? It is in the public interest that the detention of all persons, including vulnerable elderly persons, subject to prolonged detention, be scrutinized by this court and the public. This is particularly so when there is evidence of detention without legal basis, people, or sound explanation, as in the case here. The petitioners ought not to be exposed to the adverse cost awarded or any expense in seeking the remedy of habeas corpus. If any portion of the submission in support of order ought to convert this proceeding to an action. If any portion of the petitioner's detention is determined to be illegal. Well, they used the Mental Health Act with two doctors, two zealot doctors, two overzealot doctors that were quick to determine them to be this, and this, and throw them into the dungeon and throw away the key. The petitioners have a cause of action for damages against either or both of the respondents for breach of the Charter of Right and Freedoms and the tort of false imprisonment. That's what they were doing with John. Like I said, if we would have brought him home on our own, against what that social worker wanted, in terms of, he's going into convalescent care by any means necessary. And then it was, well, he might be allowed to go to his sister's up in the country for 2 months, even though he's never spent any time with her for the last 50 years of his life. It doesn't matter. She's a sister, she offered, and she's a nurse. So she can do better than you. Legal argument in support of order for the respondents to indemnify costs and expenses of this proceeding. So it's obvious these people felt like they were being falsely imprisoned, right? And because of their age, it was used against them, right? And obviously, the Vancouver Island Health Authority is on the hunt for the most vulnerable to prop up their system, right, in terms of the old folks' homes, because it's a private system, even though some of them are run by non-profits, it's still private, because what happened to these people? Right? Outside of them losing their freedom, their liberty, their life. So I don't know. I don't know what to do, people. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to amend the legal basis.